Great.
All right, so we're live, we're recorded, we have historical evidence. I'm Jonah Lacqua. Welcome to tonight's Queer Fiascos event. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Executive Director of the History Project, documenting LGBTQ Boston. We are Boston's queer community archives. And Ellyn?
And I'm Ellyn Ruthstrom, the Executive Director of SpeakOUT Boston. We are the nation's oldest LGBTQ plus speakers bureau. And we're really happy tonight to be doing this with the History Project.
Yeah, so we started planning this event pre-COVID, and we are so glad that we can still get together digitally to create a space for the community to come together, grab a beverage, whether that's an adult beverage or not, and to share in some fiascos, some laughs, maybe some tears this evening. But thank you so much for your support of both of our organizations, of the History Project and SpeakOUT. All the ticket revenue that we brought in tonight will be split between our organizations. But if you feel moved to further support our work, and we encourage movement, we're going to put some links in the chat for donations. So we have several featured speakers queued up. We have a couple of interludes of stories that folks have sent me over email, some anonymous, some named. And if you are here in the Zoom room with us and you have a short fiasco story that you'd like to share, please drop a little snippet in the chat and we'll call on some folks to participate. Does that sound good? Everyone on the journey with us?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. So our first speaker just logged on, actually. George, you're here.
Okay.
And you're speaker tonight.
Excellent.
So now introducing George Grattan.
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 Yeah.
Spelled it both ways.
Yeah.
With his fiasco.
Fantastic.
All right.
So just to give a little context for the fiasco, I first knew I was bi when I was about 9 years old. I first had words for it when I was about 15 or 16. And I didn't come out to, I kind of came out to myself at around 21 or 22 in the mirror, but didn't really come out to anyone else personally until I came out to the woman I was then dating and was soon to be engaged to and now been married to for 22, 23 years or so. And so that was in the late 1990s, about a year or so before we got engaged. I came out to her and it went very well. Obviously, it's worked out. We told a few other very close college friends and some high school friends at the time, but really not very many. I came from a liberal but still Catholic background on a small town on Eastern Long Island. And was still working through a lot of internalized biphobia. And so didn't come out to anyone in my family, neither my mom or my sisters, no cousins, aunts, uncles, and really no one in my hometown who knew my parents or knew my family, and no one in any of my extended social circles who had any potential possibility of sort of getting back to them. And so fast forward to 2014, I'm now 44, 45 at that point. And for a few years prior to that, I think as part of the marriage equality discussions, I was really feeling like it was time to come all the way out of that closet, as opposed to sort of having a timeshare closet. And so we decided that I was going to come out and that we were going to come out. And I embarked on what we've since called the Big Bi Coming Out Tour. So from about May 8th of that year, 2014, when we told my mother on Mother's Day, which Hallmark does not have a card for, or they do now, but they didn't back then, until my first Pride in Boston, which I think was June 14th that year. And my birthday was June 11th, so I kind of wanted to get this all done all at once because I was foolish enough to think that that's how coming out works, especially for a bi person. And I told everyone I'd ever ridden a bus with. I mean, I skywrote it. Practically, I would have if I could have afforded it. I came out at work, came out to all the family members. It came out to everyone, basically. And for the most part, went pretty well. And I decided I was going to cap this all off. We were both going to cap this all off with marching that year in the first Pride I'd even ever attended. And I decided I was going to jump in and march because I was out now. And we marched with my employer at the time. They had an LGBTQ and allies group, but it was a fairly conservative business school, and I didn't really know anyone else in the group. I knew a few people. We were mistaken for allies the entire time, and that was my first experience of a lot of bi erasure and biphobia at Pride, which was disappointing. But on the whole, the entire experience of the parade, the march, was just overwhelming and fantastic. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that feeling of whether it's the first time you were at it or the first time you were in it, just that sense of, oh my God, the entire city has come out to show that they love me. And of course, why shouldn't they? But I've never seen this before. And I've spent 20 years being afraid of what their reactions would be. And it's people, families, kids, old people clapping and waving flags, and what could be better. And that moment when you turn on Beacon Street and you start coming down the hill towards the home stretch, and all the tall buildings sort of crush in on you for the first time of the whole parade route, it's just overwhelming. And of course, we were both crying, and such an incredibly great experience. And then you get through the gate and you get into City Hall Plaza. And there's a lot of cool stuff to look at, and it's sensory overwhelming for me. But that was it. We didn't know anyone. We had made no plans. I knew a few people at BRC. I knew Ellyn very vaguely at that point. I didn't know anyone else in the group we were marching with. They all vanished off to go do their pre-planned traditional things that they did at Pride, or to go volunteer wherever they were volunteering. And we stupidly had just sort of thought, like, well, the city was going to throw this big parade for me and then tell me what to do. And so we kind of wandered around for a little while, and I kept getting sadder and sadder and feeling more and more disconnected. And it culminated with us just sitting on the steps around City Hall Plaza. And I'm just weeping at this point because there had been such a high, and then this felt like such a low. It felt like, why did I go through all that? What have the last 5 weeks meant? You know, I have no sense of community. I have no sense of what I'm supposed to do next. I hadn't gotten the agenda, this infamous queer agenda. No one had sent it to me. So Mary, my wife, thankfully, being usually the saner head in the relationship, said, look, we're hungry, we're tired, we're thirsty. Let's go take care of those basic needs first. And so we went off and we got a drink and a burger. And then she said, now, you do know lesbians and gay men and other bi people who've been to Pride, right? Yeah. Are any of them here? I don't know. Are any of them in your phone? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you text them and find out what should we do now? So I did, and I plugged into what little network I had at that point, and got some great advice. Very shortly, we found ourselves at the Chandler Street block party, which was another, whoa. I had a lot of fun. Mary didn't have so much fun, but then we made our way into Club Cafe early, which we learned you got to do that early. And we found ourselves on the dance floor, and one of the touchstones of our relationship had always been that we loved to dance together. And so there we were, and we were in a comfort space for us, and it was a really mixed crowd, and everybody was having a blast, and nobody was too drunk yet. And I just felt things like, I felt my chest cracking open. I just felt things loosening, and I felt this sense of joy and light coming in from the people around us. And then, of course, Gaga's Born This Way came on. And I don't think I've ever happy cried that much while dancing. So that was my fiasco into a wonderful story. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Yay. Thanks, George.
My pleasure.
All right, Ellyn, do you want to introduce our next speaker? Ellen, did I mute you? I think you might.
I probably did it to myself. So, and next up will be another Speak Out speaker, Quyen Tran, who has been speaking with Speak Out for a number of years. So, Wynn, take it away. Uh-oh.
Oh, yep, you're here.
Yay.
Make you unmuted. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
so
a little louder.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so I hadn't thought about the story for like years because I've been out for like 15 years now. Feels like forever. But recently I was part of a Watertown Buy Nothing Free group or whatever. And someone had posted that they had this awesome peach up for grabs for free. And the winner was the person who had the best peach story. So, you know, I'm kind of cheeky. So my response was, let me tell you about the first time I tried to eat a peach. Her mom walked in. So let's take this back to, it was senior year of undergrad. I mean, I had all the feelings, you know, but I'd never acted on it. I never had met anyone where I felt the need to act on it until my senior year of undergrad. And I had met this student advisor for a group, and I'd gone on a student retreat representing athletics. So I went on this retreat, and the thing that really made my head spin about this woman was that I felt like I knew her forever. Like, it was not even like a purely like sexual thing, like, oh, she's hot or whatever. It was just like, oh my God, this woman gets me. This is weird, like really bizarre. And so after that retreat, and this woman, she was an out lesbian and stuff like that. So during that year, I built this huge crush on her, and, you know, I would visit her in her office hours and just hang out in her office because I just wanted to hang out with her, right? But, you know, boundaries. So, you know, I was the good kid. I wasn't going to do anything to like with those boundaries. And so, but, you know, like she obviously caught a hint that I might, you know, be into her, like, because I kept on showing up in her office, and, you know, I played softball for the college, so I would get excited when she'd show up for my softball games and all that crap. So I was like, oh God, here it is. And so shortly after I graduated, I told her, you know, how I felt about her. And she's like, yeah, I pretty much caught that. I pretty much guessed that. I was like, duh, right? It's pretty obvious. So after that, we started like talking and stuff. You know, she was at that point, like she was probably maybe 2 or 3 years older than me. But so she was experienced, and I literally had no experience whatsoever. I was pretty much asexual. Men, I was never interested in men, so I had no experience whatsoever. So she was my first everything. So I was chasing this woman, and we'd be talking or whatever. And, you know, there was that slow buildup. That was that summer after my senior year of undergrad. I had gotten a graduate assistantship out in Ohio. So we were talking, hanging out all summer, you know, maybe you just making out here and there, but there was nothing serious that had happened up to that point, right? And so I moved away to Ohio at the end of the summer. That was like August, and we were still communicating. We were just still talking and stuff. So after I moved away to Ohio, and she lived in New Jersey, so we had made this plan to meet up in Pennsylvania at Shippensburg University, because that's where her brother went to college. He had an, you know, off-campus apartment that we could just go there. He actually worked at a hotel, so he could get us a room. So we were just going to make plans to meet up. So, right, this is like the 1 year build up. Like, I'm going to do it, guys. Like, at this point, like I said, I'm a total virgin. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm going to go for it because, you know, I'm going to just figure my body's going to tell me what I want to do, right? I'm just going to just go with it, right? And so we make plans to go meet up in Pennsylvania. And then turns out for some reason, the hotel that her brother worked at was entirely booked because there was a motorcycle convention. And so all the rooms had been booked. But the thing that worked out is her brother worked nights. So we stayed in his room while he worked nights at the hotel. So we meet up, and we got in late at night, so we're just like tired, we're gonna go to sleep, right? And we had made plans the next morning to meet up with her mom for brunch, right? To have brunch with her mom. So I don't know what it was, like maybe the whole pent up year of like just pent up every sexual everything, right? So for some reason that morning, I decided I was gonna go for it. So I get butt naked in the, like, I just go for it, right? I get butt naked and I'm on top of her. I'm butt naked. I'm on top of her. She still has her clothes on, right? So I'm doing things up her shorts, right? And then, you know, she's being vocal and letting me know she's enjoying herself, right? And then she stops and she goes, hello. And I turn and look, her mom is standing in the doorway. So I fall over on top of her to cover myself up because I'm seducing her daughter. I'm butt naked seducing her daughter. So she closes the door and leaves the bedroom. So she scrambles out from underneath me. Like she still has her clothes on. So I take a second to go throw my clothes on. And I come out of the bedroom. And so her brother is out there because he had slept on the couch when he came home from work. His roommate and the girlfriend are out there. She's out there with her mom. So everyone knows what had happened. Like, hi, everyone. Like, oops. And so like her mom was totally cool about it or whatever. And we went and had brunch or whatever. And, you know, later that night I sealed the deal. I was fine. But the joke was, I said to her, I said, you know what? That's fine that your mom saw me butt naked, but your mom saw your O face. So that's my story.
Oh my goodness. Oh yes.
Right? Good fiasco, right? Like
Yes, yes. The people are waving their flags. There. Anyone that's ever been walked in before, they certainly resonate with that story. Thanks, man. That's fabulous.
Thank you. Did you get the free item on the Facebook page? Did they like your story?
What?
what free item?
You said that you posted on like a pick something up for free Facebook. You had to have the best story.
Oh. I think she meant that she just mentioned the peach idea as a joke, but you didn't tell the whole story, did you?
I did get the peach.
But did you tell that whole story?
No, I didn't tell her the whole story. It was in the Watertown group. I didn't know if she was ready for that story.
Right. I'm glad you saved it for us.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. For anyone who's ever dealt with that embarrassment, yep.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. So, yeah, so we just wanted to give you a little bit more information for those of you who don't know about SpeakOUT and the History Project, just to fill in a little bit of detail about the organizations for you. SpeakOUT, as I said, is the oldest LGBTQ speakers bureau in the country. And we specialize in training folks within the community to tell our personal stories. And then we go out to various audiences. Of course, right now we're not going out into different spaces, but we're actually doing online engagements right now. So we are keeping up the flow with telling our stories and opening up dialogues with various audiences. A lot of businesses right now doing their Pride Month activities, and we're really hoping that we'll be able to continue the online format for dealing with meeting with schools and colleges, faith communities that we always do. So we'll be also hopefully having our new training. So if anyone is interested in becoming a speaker, stay on the lookout for training information. We also, this has been our third year of having a scholarship for LGBTQ students. And that's something we are really happy to have started a new tradition with in helping LGBTQ students fulfill their higher education dreams. We love that. And we also want to do, we do occasional community forums, activities, events such as this. We did a wonderful event a couple years back with the History Project featuring LGBTQ veterans. We did a great event also about the bisexual identity, and that was really great too. So we're always looking for opportunities to raise awareness about our community within lots of different public venues. And tomorrow is SpeakOUT Day. So if you are hooked up with us on different channels, you'll see different information about us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter tomorrow. And we'd love it if you follow us and boost us along the way so that more people can learn about the organization. And Joan, tell us more about the History Project.
Yeah, so the History Project, this year is our 40th anniversary. We've been around since 1980, documenting, preserving, and sharing LGBTQ history. And so we do that by collecting the records of organizations and individuals in the Boston area, but if you're from Massachusetts, you know Boston really means New England. And we take in those collections, we preserve them, we make them accessible to researchers and to the community. And especially right now, while we can only connect digitally, we've been holding digital out of the archives talks almost weekly, not every single week, where a community member or a historian comes in and talks about the research that they've done, the things that they've learned, and we come together as a community to experience our history together. If you're interested in Out of the Archives, if you're interested in queer history, we have one scheduled for tomorrow night with the National Park Service. And sneak peek, our topic next week is with a romance novel author who works on trans historical romances. And they're going to talk about the research involved in that and the writing process. So it's a lot of fun. And we would love to have you and to learn more about your history. And like Ellyn said, we love working with other queer organizations and people on making sure that our history is accessible and available and out there for the world to know about. So with that little intro, I actually have a story that was written in to us to share tonight. It's a queer fiasco from the 1980s. And our writer, whose name is Jack, doesn't recall exactly what year this fiasco occurred, but it started at a post-Pride party. I'm gonna make myself, I'm the spotlight now. So at this post-Pride party, a group of friends were invited to the host's basement apartment on Waltham Street in the South End. Everyone had arrived and put out tables full of food. Drinks were set up in the kitchen, so people were congregating kind of all over the apartment. And our author decided to use the bathroom off the kitchen. And this year at Pride, it was raining. It was raining very heavily, and so everyone was inside partying. He uses the bathroom, and when he flushed the toilet, it overflowed. And it wasn't just a little overflow, it was a large overflow. He went and sought out the host, but by the time he found him, it was clear that the sewers in the entire South End had backed up. And so sewer water started gushing out of the toilet at a fast rate. So this party quickly mobilized from a post-Pride celebration into a line of mostly gay young men bailing sewage out of the apartment. And so he describes it as a water brigade group going up the stairs from this basement apartment into the street using every container they could find to try to bail out this apartment. And they soon realized that there was no way to keep up. The water was rising, it was getting close to the electrical outlets, it wasn't stopping, and it had turned out that the entire South End was having a similar problem, but it was Saturday, and so there weren't extra workers, or there weren't the same amount of workers working to set up an extra pump. So this was kind of going on in more than one apartment. So the party grabbed what they could, they all left. The host and his soaking wet cat decamped to the writer's apartment on the 4th floor of another building in the South End, where both the host and the cat were showered down. and they stayed until the apartment could be restored. The writer doesn't know where others sought shelter or cleaned up, but he concludes that it was a very dramatic ending to gay pride, suitable to the drama queens in attendance. So, with that interlude, do we have any audience members who would like to share their own story? I'm looking at one particular audience member with a waving flag in his background, who I might volunteer.
You don't have to volunteer me. I'm actually I'm on the schedule as far as I know.
Oh, okay, well,
I'll just go.
I have you written down as audience plant, Bill. Here we are.
Audience prepared audience member. So hi, I'm Bill Barnert, and I've been speaking with SpeakOUT since 1980. And today I'm going to take you back even further than that to tell 3 quick stories linked together by a shirt. One mini fiasco, one counterpoint to the mini fiasco, and then the story I immediately thought of when I heard that tonight's topic was queer fiascos. So, story 1, the mini fiasco. I graduated from Brown in 1978, and right after I graduated, I flew out to California to visit a friend of mine from high school and see his graduation. And that meant I was out of town for what would have been my first gay pride. But I knew that when I came back, that Saturday was going to be Providence Pride. So I just planned on going to that. And I drove down and I put on a shirt that said Brown in really, really big letters. Can you see it? The flag keeps jumping in the way. And figured, let people know who I am. And off I went. Well, it didn't turn out to be quite what I was expecting. There were probably 30 people there and 2 television crews. And here I am with Brown across my chest. So it's not like, oh, I might have seen someone who looked like you on television. That was me. And I found out while I was there that the following day, Sunday, was New York Pride. And I hadn't planned on going to it, and I hadn't brought a change of clothes, but I grew up in New York and my mom still lived there, and I gave her a call and made plans to stay there that night, wash everything I was wearing so I could wear it again, and went to New York Pride the next day with about 1 billion other people, which was really, for me, a contrast to Providence Pride. So my first 2 gay prides were the same weekend, 30 people and 30 billion. Story 2, the counterpoint to the mini fiasco. So emboldened by my TV outing, I gathered some friends and we decided to start a queer alumni group for Brown. So for the next 2 summers, at Boston Pride and at Providence Pride, I put the shirt back on and I carried around a stack of index cards and some pen. And anyone that would come up to me and say, "You went to Brown? I went to Brown." Boom. They'd get an index card and a pen, and I'd say, "Give me your information. We're starting well, I think back then I would have said a gay alumni group." And that's how the group that's now known as Brown TV Gala was born. And finally, story number 3, the fiasco. So once we got the Brown alumni group going, we had to do something with it. And my friend Steve was a member of the group and a graphic designer, and he designed this wonderful stationery. And we took out an ad in the Brown Alumni magazine, we planned a dinner event over commencement reunion weekend. We took out an ad that said, eat, drink, and be gay. Started a whole letter writing campaign. But also I had this stack of addresses. And so I printed up a flyer and, like many of us, I'm sure, used the office copier to make a couple dozen copies and, you know, got ready to mail them out. Remember mail? You put it in an envelope, you put a stamp on it. So, I was sort of out at work to a couple of friends. I wasn't anywhere near as out as I am now. You know, my friends knew, but it wasn't like everybody knew. And later that afternoon, I wandered into the department secretary's office for something. And she asked me if I knew who in the department went to Brown. And I thought, well, there's two of us, so-and-so and myself. Why? And she said, well, I found this in the copier. I had left the original in the copier. And she goes, I found this in the copier and just wanted to know who to give it back to. Thud. That was the sound of my heart hitting my throat simultaneously to my jaw hitting the ground. I guess I was out at that point. And trust me, I have never looked back. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Bill. So we have next on our list of speakers, Shawn Mims, who's with the Mass Bears and Cubs. Shawn, are you ready to be?
I am ready.
Excellent. Thank you, Shawn, for participating. And a special shout out to the Mass Bears and Cubs.
Yeah, thanks. So I want to tell you guys a story about when I kind of first hit the scene, so to speak, with Mass Bears and Cubs. So this was about maybe 3.5 years ago. And I was kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a midlife crisis or just I was going through a good time or what you would call it. But I was kind of like, you know what? It's time to get yourself together and kind of get back out in the world and start dating again and all this. And so I kind of started doing that, got back to the gym and lost some weight and kind of had felt I was going into like a newfound freedom, so to speak. So in the process of doing all of this, I thought, you know, I have been really partying my ass off for the last 25 years. I should really, really give back to the community. Find some way to do that. But so I didn't really know about kind of how to get into finding volunteer opportunities or really what was going on out there. And of course I had heard of, you know, all the great places that you can volunteer at, and I have volunteered at since. But I really just didn't know how to get into it. And also I was kind of being lazy. I guess this is the nice way to say it. But I kind of was like, I want to find some way of doing this, but I kind of want it done for me. So I happened to say this to a friend of mine, and he said, oh, you know, that's actually great. I'm actually on the board of this group, and we're looking for volunteers and board members. You should join. And I said, oh, okay, great. Now, mind you, most of the people I'm talking to are 10 to 15 years younger than me. So I said, oh, this is great, yeah. So I went to a meeting, and it was awesome. And, you know, the guys who had taken over the leadership were very young. They were 28 and 29, very into the scene. They knew all the party places and very well connected. And, you know, we knew a lot of the same people. And it was just, I was like, okay, this is going to be awesome. I get to volunteer and do some kinds of things. So in a board meeting, one of my first or second board meetings, they said, hey, we're going to do this benefit down at the Providence Eagle. You should come. In fact, you should volunteer for it. And I said, oh, okay, great. What needs to be done? What is it? And so come to find out, it was actually going to be a fundraiser for HRC, which involved people modeling jock straps and harnesses. And then there will also be silent auctions of other kinds of items in that category that various vendors had donated. It was actually really great. We ended up with a lot of stuff. And you haven't lived until you've seen a very large box of jock straps. but we got so much stuff donated, it was awesome. So now, mind you, remember at this point in my life, like I've been hitting the gym for about 6 months. I shed a little of the extra dinner rolls around my waist, and had even kind of gotten to the point where, you know what, I need to let go of this like conservative air I've got. I need to get out there and get out in the world and have some fun and do all these things. So I started going to underwear night at the alley bar and kind of feeling that liberation of dancing with 300 people in your underwear. And so I got this new liberation. So shortly before the benefit was to take place down in Rhode Island, the guy, my friend Matt, who was the leader of Mass Bears at the time, said, you know, we don't have enough people to model the underwear and the jock straps and the harnesses. And I said, oh. And my brain said, you can do that. But that old Shawn was kind of saying, do you really want to do that? And then there was like the, if you remember from the old cartoons where there's the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. And so in this particular case, the devil won, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this because I know it's going to be fun and it's going to be great. And hey, it's for a good cause. Why not? So I said, but can't wear a jockstrap. I only save those parts of me for certain friends. So my boyfriend, who is now my partner still, we decided to take a road trip down there. We ended up road tripping it down to the Providence Eagle, and we ended up staying in the Providence Inn, which was really, really great. And I had never been to the Providence Eagle, so I had never seen kind of what it's like inside during their club nights. And so it's very dark and very red. And it's very hard to see, and it's very interesting to hold a silent auction when you can't see people. But I ended up in a very nice, I don't know what you would call this material, maybe neoprene harness. Had two nice little rings here, fit right around the nipples. It was awesome. I ended up on stage with about maybe a dozen other people who were in various states of nakedness. And then surprisingly, now mind you, all I knew was that I was going to be walking around in my underwear in this harness. I didn't really know what the program for the night was going to be. So I had no idea that I was going to be on stage with all these other people. And there were lots of cameras, which was interesting. But what was even more interesting was that then there was this auction where a set of people who had modeled their jock straps were now going to have an auction for people to auction to get that particular jock strap, which fundraising strategy never occurred to me, but it did happen. And it actually worked. But what was interesting was also just being on stage again. And now that when there's a winning bid for this particular jockstrap, the person basically stands in front of a sheet that's being held up and takes it off on stage. Mind you, I'm behind the sheet with this person. And so a lot of things I was happy to see. Some things I kind of wish I hadn't, but you know, it's the way it goes. But that's my story of how I ended up in the harness, peddling jock straps for justice. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Shawn. Thank you for sharing that story.
Thanks, Shawn. There must be something illegal about crossing state lines to do that. Thanks.
So next on our list of featured speakers is Trevor Boylston. Trevor, are you here and ready?
I am.
Excellent. Hello.
I love the theme of jockstraps for justice. I might have to steal that someday. So I'm going to step in the way back a little bit here. It's going to go back to 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. Early in my transition years when I had a lot more of this and none of this. And I had recently come out to my family. I moved back home after getting out of an abusive relationship, and luckily my mother was incredibly supportive, and we lived with my grandmother at the time, so her house, her rules for the most part. It's important to know I also had a boxer puppy at the time, and this puppy had a lot of energy and liked to get into things that she really shouldn't have been getting into. So we're home one afternoon, and the mail had just arrived, and in the mail was my very first packer. And it was in a nice, discreet U.S. postal mailbox. It didn't have anything on the outside of it that would indicate what it was, except I knew what it was because I had been tracking the package so closely. So my grandmother brings the mail in and sets it on the table and says, "Oh, you have a package." And I said, "Oh, okay." Obviously was not going to open it right there. No intention of opening this in front of anybody. And all of a sudden it starts to rain, and my grandmother shrieks, "Oh my God, the cushions are still out." She was so fastidious about her cushions for her lawn chairs. Every time it rained, you had to run and grab them and put them away and shut all the windows. And this was the routine. So we knew it. Anytime anyone was home, if it started to rain, that's just what you did. So I jump up and I run outside, and I'm putting cushions away and running around the house, putting windows down, and get back down to the kitchen, and the package isn't on the table anymore. And it was like, oh, I knew it was right here. And my grandmother's in the other room. She says, "Oh, did the dog get a new toy? What's the dog got?" And she, of course, when I ran outside, had jumped up on the table and gotten the package and torn it open and was running around circles. We called it the Idiot 500 route, around the dining room table with my packer. Around and around and around and around. And I was dying. It's my mother and my grandmother chasing the dog with my packer. And I wanted to walk off into the ocean and never come back. So eventually I got it away. My grandmother never actually got a really good look at it. She thought it was just a piece of rubber. So I managed to save a little bit of dignity with that and whisk it away to safety. It did have a couple holes in it, but it was mine, and I still used it. The dog was not allowed anywhere near it after that, but that's only the first part of the story. So second part, I had a hard time finding a harness that I liked to wear. It was uncomfortable. This thing's a piece of rubber. It's in your shorts. It's summer. It's hot. It's uncomfortable. So had gone through a couple different options. Finally found one that was like the bare minimum strap of fabric with a couple of elastics attached to it. And it had a rubber O-ring that held everything in place. Well, again, it's summer. It's hot. I sweat. The O-ring eventually snapped. And I grabbed the first thing I could find to fix it, which happened to be a metal keyring. Worked really well. Kind of forgot about it. So weeks go by, and I have the court appointment for my name change. And I'm very excited. This is the first real step to becoming who I am today and getting my documentation to all line up. So I get dressed in my nice shirt and my tie, and I had my hair, buzzed. It wasn't quite this short. It was actually something to put gel in at the time. I put on my nice watch. It's like and then I realized I wasn't going to be able to wear the watch. Got myself really nice spiffed up. At the time, I didn't own a suit, so it was close as I could get, and head off to the courthouse. And I'm in line outside the courthouse because it takes forever to get through security, and we're getting closer to the front, and there's maybe 6 or 7 people now between me and what I realize is a metal detector. And all of a sudden I remember the piece of metal that's holding everything together in my pants. And I start to sweat and I start to get nervous and I start thinking, how am I going to explain when this sets off the metal detector and it's not my belt and it's not a set of keys and it's nothing? And I was panicking, just absolute panic. My heart's racing. My face is bright red. Now I'm sweating. Now I'm looking around. Now I'm making people suspicious because I'm trying to go into a courthouse acting like there's a problem. And I'm just, my mind is racing. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And all of a sudden I was through and it never set off the metal detector. And I went on my way and I found a nice corner to sit in and remember to breathe before going in front of the judge. And that's my problems with packing.
Wonderful stories.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Trevor. So before we get to our next story, we have an audience participation story. And then I have another little interlude that was written into the History Project. And for this interlude, the writer did not want to identify themselves. It's very short. So the writer went out with a guy for 8 months or so. To me, that sounds like he got cuffed. And it didn't work out. And so one night when they were out at a club, the writer told this guy that he didn't want to see him anymore. And the guy stormed off. And when the writer left the club later that night, there was red paint all over the hood of the car. So the writer put in an insurance claim and got $1,000 and had his car cleaned up. And then for our audience participation story, Jessica Taylor in the chat. Are you ready, Jessica? See if I can find you.
There I am.
Excellent.
Okay, so this is something that I just thought of as we were beginning, thinking, I don't have any fiascos. No fiascos for me. But then I remembered that, so there's a yearly anthropology conference that I've gone to in Canada a lot. And I remembered, oh, that conference is basically a fiasco magnet, some of which are, you know, in retrospect, lighthearted, and some of which are a little bit sad. So it's like bad luck for me. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of why I should never, ever go to this anthropology conference again. The first one was about 2005, I think. And I was a graduate student then. And I had my first real serious girlfriend. But I think we both thought that the other one was more experienced than she was. So there was not a lot of communicating going on. We were really trying to make things work, but it was obviously that what we needed to do was actually talk about things, and we were not doing that. So I've written my paper. I go off to my conference, which is in Montreal, and I check my email, and there's an email from her saying, we're going to break up. Okay, so obviously I spend the rest of the conference crying and wandering through the streets of Montreal, just thinking like, what do we do? You know, I write her an email saying, can we make this work? Obviously not. That was the best. And, you know, years later, I went to her wedding and she came to mine. So it's fine. But that's just the first sign that perhaps I should never go to this conference again. The second sign was about, I think, 4 or 5 years later. This one's the slightly sad one. I'm going to this conference and this time it's in Victoria, so on the West Coast. This conference is bad for me from East Coast of Canada to West Coast. I am in the airport in Vancouver, transferring to my plane in Victoria, when I get an email from my mother saying that my grandmother has died. She was at a stage where we knew she was going to pass away soon. And so this was very sad. I had a kind of a mournful conference, but it wasn't unexpected. This was a grandmother that I was never going to come out to. But I loved her dearly. And that was another sign that perhaps this conference was not for me. Then the third one is also a mixture of sad and even sadder, and then things work out in the end. And that one was about 5 years ago, I think, so 2015. I'm gone to the conference in Halifax. My then and still now wife at the time and I had been talking with a known sperm donor, and we had gotten to a stage where we were talking. It was going to be serious. We were going to work through a contract, figure out what kinds of things we each wanted from the process of donation, and we were very happy about that. Get to the conference. I'm staying with a friend of mine who is out there in Halifax. And I got a call from my wife saying, oh no, actually our known donor has decided that it's not going to work. It has not told us the reason, but that's everybody's prerogative, not to donate their sperm. And so yet another conference where I am sad, I'm crying, and ultimately things work out. We have a baby now. That's fine. He is 6 months old and hopefully sleeping. But to make this conference work, and to even worse, and to really, really strike home to me that I should probably never go again. The friend I was staying with, she had 2 children. It was warm. We got some ice cream cones, and I made the fatal mistake of allowing one of the children to lick my ice cream cone, and he gave me a cold. So not only was I sad the entire conference, I was also quite terribly down with a cold. So I think that was my lesson, that I should never go to that conference again. And all of those things were queer fiascos because I was involved and I'm queer.
Thank you, Jessica. Excellent fiasco stories. So next on our program is John Kyper, who's got some 1970s fiascos for us, I believe. Are you here, John?
I'm here.
Excellent. Good to see you. Hi, Bill.
Hi. Well, I came out at the very end of the 1960s. I college dropout that moved down from Vermont to fight it out with the Vietnam draft as a conscientious objector. And then secondly, to deal with my sexuality and with lots of false starts. I think learning about Stonewall a few months later was the kick that I needed to come out of the closet. And this was probably in October of 1969. I was visiting my parents and reading their issue of Newsweek magazine with the very homophobic coverage, an article about Stonewall called Police and the Third Sex. But it was, hearing about Stonewall was the kick that I needed to come out. And I started reading in the underground press that was being, printed in those days, that about the gay liberation movement that was happening in New York, in San Francisco, and Los Angeles. But I started looking around. There was nothing apparently going on in Boston that I could find. And I finally, through an ad in the Boston Phoenix, a personals ad in early 1970s, looking for people who are interested in forming a student homophile league. So we had a formative meeting at BU's Sherman Union in a conference room, and we decided we would hold regular socials, weekly socials, Friday nights. And so that was a beginning, but then we got many of us were more politically inclined. I mean, the early LGBT movement in Boston was half hippie counterculture, like myself, and half very conservative, people who were, many of them older, some of them not, who were very, very paranoid about rocking the boat and, being afraid they were going to be outed. And so there was that tension. And in fact, I met one of them, told me he was convinced that the gay liberation movement was sent to infiltrate the gay community, by whom he did not say. But those of us who were more politically inclined decided to, we would have, started demonstrations. We had a demonstration, the April 1970 moratorium against the Vietnam War in Boston Common, with big signs, "Bring the boys home, Gay Liberation Front," and which caused quite a stir with some of the more doctrinaire leftists, some of the more conservative peaceniks, and actually a lot of the gay people I was acquainted with over the years, who were making innuendos that we were basically trying to pick up guys. And so we decided a few months later, the first anniversary of Stonewall, we did not go to New York City or have a march in Boston. Instead, there were only, again, 30 of us. We had some seminars over the weekend, and I think the highlight for me was dialogue with a straight world. How much of a dialogue we got, I don't know. There were only two non-gay people who I remember at the event, but we decided that to end the weekend, we would have a gay-in Cambridge Common. There were weekly rock concerts on Sunday afternoons. And so we were, and then the Gray Line tourist buses came by. And so we started, embracing and waving to all the, the tourists from Sioux City or wherever. And, the following year, we actually did have our first march that's, from Jacques to the police station headquarters, and then on Berkeley Street, to the State House, to St. Paul's Cathedral, and a closet smashing. And there was, at that point, there was a lot of, political factionalism was coming out. There was this group, these Socialist Workers' Party, which had, up until a couple months before, had expelled gays from their membership, realized they were losing a lot of followers that way. They decided to adopt us, and they wanted to take over the movement, which was, we did not like that idea. They were we told them in very uncertain terms that no, you cannot do it that way.
John, thank you so much. Thank you for filling in some great history for us. The beginnings of the movement in Boston. That was so great to hear that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and now we're back up to, we got factions in Boston trying to figure out what pride should be.
Yeah.
It all comes back around again.
It all repeats itself.
So as our next on our list actually is Ellyn of SpeakOUT. So
Yeah.
Ellyn, I'm going to make you our spotlight. And there we are.
Okay. Well, now this story has three elements to it. a bad relationship, a technology snafu, and the question of, is honesty always the best policy? So this involves a woman who I was involved with. This was over 20 years ago now. And we were living together. We'd only been together about a year and a half. I will call her Jay. And Jay and I were hitting a kind of a rocky patch, we'll say, just to be vague about it. And we worked at the same place, which is always a dangerous situation and never recommended. We worked in the same building, we were on the same floor, and that kind of features in the story. So I was in my office, and I was as I mentioned, we were kind of hitting a rocky patch. So I was typing out an email to my best friend, and I was kind of, telling her about what was going on in this relationship with Jay. And I wasn't giving away any couple secrets or anything, but I was expressing myself in terms of how I was feeling in the relationship. And, got through that. And then I hit send. And then I realized I had filled in Jay's email address, not my best friend's address. And I was like, oh my God, I just sent it to Jay. Now, probably most of you are tech savvy enough to think like, oh, well, you should have recalled it or something very quickly. I'm not particularly tech savvy, and especially 20 years ago, I had no idea. And I don't know if you could have done it at that point, maybe. But anyway, I just got up and out of my chair and ran down the hall to her office to see if I could, interfere with this email or just talk to her or something if she had read it already. I ran down to her office. She wasn't there, so that was good. I was like, oh, she hasn't read it. And then her office mate was there. And so I just kind of went in, and she was used to seeing me visit. So I went in, and her computer, she had her email open on her screen. So I just went over and I moused over my email and deleted it. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Other tech savvy people right now are probably saying, oh yeah, but it's in the delete folder, isn't it? Well, I didn't think of that. I just deleted it and left the room, went back to my office thinking, oh, okay. So I've solved that. So I got a call from Janice a little bit later. And she said, yeah, so, my office mate said she came in, and what did you want? And I just can't lie. And so I just spilled the beans. I'm like, I sent you something. I didn't want to send you. It was supposed to go to somebody else. I'm really sorry. I just went in and I deleted it. So of course she immediately read it, pulled it out of the delete folder and read it. But now if this had been a healthy, happy relationship, a little thing like this probably wouldn't matter that much. But there was enough kind of dysfunction going on in the relationship. And what I realized when we sort of argued about this situation was that she was more disturbed by the fact that I could have read other things in her email than what she had read in my email. And that really kind of set it off for me of like the distrust in the relationship. And dear listener, let us just say that I was looking for a new place to live very soon after that. And the moral of the story, of course, is always double check who you're sending your emails to. And yes, I do believe that honesty is the best policy, because I think that telling the truth at that moment ended the relationship that really needed to be ended. So there you have it. There's my fiasco for you.
Thank you, Ellyn. So we have another interlude, and we're looking for one more audience story. So if anyone wants to do the hand raise while I tell this interlude, we can call on you to do a quick on-the-spot story. But this interlude is my story. It's a relatively recent queer fiasco. But last summer, my in-laws live in Vermont, and my wife and I live here in Massachusetts. We don't see them a ton. But they were already going to be in southern Maine for a wedding, and their anniversary was coming up, or my mother-in-law's birthday. It was something summery. And so we decided to rent a room in an Airbnb, or a little suite of rooms, so that we could meet up with them in the afternoon, spend some time, stay overnight, get breakfast the next day. They'd go back up to Vermont. We'd come back down to Massachusetts, or back down to Quincy. So we found this mansion in Ipswich, and it was listed as country manse. And so we booked it, and we got there and realized that it was an actual mansion, an enormous place. We had rented 2 rooms. There were other rooms rented out. There was a horse competition going on, a carriage race competition. So it's very pastoral, like horses and carriages and horse people staying in this mansion, and us. And so we get there, and we're checked in by this younger guy, and we can tell that he and the owner of the mansion seem to be companions of some kind. We're gay, so we're like, whatever. It's, one of those older, younger kind of relationship things. How great. And the younger guy is the one who checks us into the Airbnb. And the experience itself is surreal, because it's like staying in a historic house museum. Everything is old. There's artwork everywhere, candelabra, and very 18th century New England mansion. And so we hang out with some woman competing in the horse competition. We have a bottle of wine. We're like, this is great. So the next morning we get up, and we're having breakfast off of the kitchen, where it seems like this older guy and his companion mostly live out of. It's like the more lived in, as opposed to the historic part of the house. And we noticed that there's a mourning card up. Somebody had sent a card to this older guy saying, we're so sorry to hear about your partner passing. And it's out, and so we look at it, and my wife and I turn to each other like, this name looks really familiar. Whose house is this? So we Googled it, and it turned out that the partner that had passed away had been a higher up in the Republican Party for the majority of his career, and had helped to get, I think, Reagan and Bush Sr. elected. And so we have this revelation. And I'm not sure if it was my wife or my wife's, my father-in-law, who said, oh my goodness, we've been staying in this mansion. The log cabin is a mansion in Ipswich, Massachusetts. And that's my queer fiasco. So did we get any audience participants for their queer interlude?
Yeah, does anyone else want to share?
I'm just checking through the chat. Because if no one else wants to share, we have our a final featured speaker.
Yes, we do.
Wait,
I think we will turn to him.
Bill would like to share.
Oh, Bill. Okay.
Well, I don't know. We have to
You're on
change
the
things
spot.
up. I don't know if this is appropriate, but a lunch with Anita Bryant, would that be appropriate to?
Oh, that sounds like a fiasco.
Appropriate.
Oh, yeah, it's more or less. The summer of 1963, a while ago, I was an apprentice at the music circus in Cohasset. And apprentices did all the scut work, move sets and all that sort of thing. And I was 17, and they gave me the job of taking care of the guns for Annie Get Your Gun, put them in the right place around the tent. and Anita Bryant was Annie Get Your Gun. And I can proudly say that I ruined her opening night. No one told me there was safety catches on guns, and they didn't fire when the appropriate time came. So, but after the performance, I apologized profusely, and she was very kind to me. It's possible, and she brought me to the press tent, and we had a picture taken together, which is in the History Project files, as some of you know. And I didn't have it ready, so I can't show you. I used to be very pretty in those days, blonde hair, blue eyes, and all that stuff. Anyway, she took me to lunch. And I remember the little cafe, and she was a very odd person, as you might imagine. She was wired all the time. She kept walking around reciting her lines. I guess she was afraid she'd forget them. And not paying attention to much anything else. And then during the lunch, she was selling Coca-Cola at the time. This is before Minute Maid. And she actually told me that Coca-Cola was actually good for you. She couldn't tell me what was in it, but it was very, very good for you. And I spent a week with her doing that job anyway. That's my exciting time with Anita Bryant. She was very nice to me, I must say. This is I didn't even know I was gay at that point, so, you know. I started to suspect, though, because the other apprentices were talking about the singers and the dancers, you know, from New York, and were kind of in another world. And Tab Hunter had been the 2 weeks before, and they talked about him endlessly as someone who was gay. Of course, they used the Q word then. And so I started thinking, what is this category? I think maybe I'm in that category. So that's
Sharing that.
Yeah, I don't think everyone can say Anita Bryant helped them.
Yes.
It doesn't involve throwing a pie at her.
When I became a teacher, I really should have sent her a note, you know, when she was doing her thing. But anyway.
So we're on to our final. Thank you so much, Bill.
You're welcome.
We're on to our final speaker of the night, featured speaker of the night. Carlos, are you there?
I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My story comes with a couple warnings. Foul language, I guess technically bodily harm. I'm cursed. My entire life, the 4th of July has always been the worst holiday ever for me, like ever. A couple years ago, we decided we were going to break the curse, and like what better way to break the curse with like the power of gay. So it says my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it holds for the story. It could be the curse. We'll see.
We can
we're going to break it with the power of gay. So we're going to P-Town for the 4th of July. It's a whole, but I'm frozen. Hello, Bueller.
Yes.
Yeah?
So we can hear you, but,
okay.
But you're frozen.
That sounds about right. We're going to break the curse with the power of gay. We're going to go to P-Town on the 4th of July. It's going to be amazing. Everything is just going to completely turn around. It was going to be the life-changing moment I needed. We were staying at the P-Town Inn. We get there early on the first ferry, and we drop off all of our stuff in this little room because our rooms aren't ready yet, and they're like, change into your Speedo, go to the pool, it'll be fine. I was there with a whole bunch of friends. One of them, my best friend, we like sat down, we're laying out, everything's great. I had my first drink in hand, and I turned to them and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go get another drink, do you want one? And they're like, yeah, I'll come with you. So we start walking, and the P-Town Inn has those plastic lawn chairs, and I just like happened to catch my pinky on one, and it immediately goes sideways. And my gut reaction was rage. Theirs was disgust. I immediately reached down and snapped it back into place. I limped over to the bartender. She goes, do you want another drink? And I said, no, I need to close out, and do you have a first aid kit? She immediately was like, sure. Fortunately, we have a couple physicians, assistants, and nurses in the friend group, and they were able to look at my toe and tape it to the one next to it. And I was like, we're not going to let this stop us. Back to breaking the curse. I'm fine. You're fine. Everyone's fine. That night we got rained out from actually doing anything outdoors. And the next night was the 4th of July. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. One of my friends is a DJ. He was DJing this private party. It was right on the beach. We could see the fireworks. It was like the perfect moment. So we go, the drinks are free. Everyone's having a great time. Fireworks happen. I think we're out of the woods. I'm like, 4th of July is over. We did it. Yay. The tide's rolling in. So I go up to the DJ and I say, like, just to give him like a thank you for having us. So while I'm there, my phone is buzzing and I'm not thinking anything of it. So I finally say goodbye to him. I start going downstairs and I look down at my phone and my best friend, the one who was like, oh, we're gonna break the curse together. It'll be great. I have 2 missed calls and a flood of texts. I'm just like, all right, what's going on? So everyone is dispersed at this point because the tide has rolled in. I find them sitting on the rocks, covered in blood. And I was like, what happened? So turns out they had slipped and fallen almost immediately after I left, hit a rock on their chin, and because the drinks are free, none of our blood is clotting, so it's just running. So at that point, I'm stone sober, because I'm like, emergency mode, let's do this. I limp her over to Commercial Street, and I like pour her into one of those little chariots that they have bikes with. And I'm like, take us back to P-Town Inn. We're done. I'm calling it. So we get back there. I get her into bed. She's like heartbroken that like the night is ruined. Nothing is okay. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. Everything is fine. For those of you, she no longer works there, but there is a bartender at the P-Town named Mary. She's a bit of a staple. She's very much a local. And she runs the bar on the nights when they know no one is going to be drinking because she has a bit of an attitude. So I do the quick math in my head. I'm like, it's already 11 o'clock. By the time I get there, there's no fun to be had. So I limp my way down to the P-Town Inn bar. Mary takes one look at me and says, what the fuck are you doing here? And I'm like, Mary, everything is awful. So I spent the 4th of July pouring my poor heart out to her. The next day sees us cutting our 4th of July P-Town adventure short. It was one of the saddest mental images I think I have, where it's me, my best friend, I'm bandaged, she's bandaged, sunburned, just like, get me off the island. And that's about it. Joan, did I miss anything? Did your scar ever go away?
Yep, so I'm the best friend in that story.
Frozen, I think.
The scar did go away. I met my now wife 3 weeks ago. I still had a little mark on my chin.
No, hold it higher.
Oh gosh. Oh, and we have a picture from Bill of Anita Bryant. Carlos, thank you for sharing that story.
You're welcome.
If I tell that story, it sounds less of like a fiasco and more horribly depressing and embarrassing.
You want to bring the picture up or what?
Oh, yeah.
Tried.
There we go. Yep. Pull that up. Anita Bryant and Bill.
And 17-year-old Bill Cody. That's after I ruined your opening night.
What a sweet young thing you were.
Yes, Troy Donahue and Tab Hunter come on. It says we're going over the script of And You Get Your Gun underneath. So it was in the Situate Mirror, a fine publication.
No, great.
Excellent.
Well, thank you all. I thank everyone for sharing tonight. There were some really great stories, and what a variety too.
Yeah, that was so much fun. Thank you all so much for participating, for being here, for supporting the History Project and SpeakOUT. Again, we are just so appreciative that you took the time to come here, that you took the time to come and share your fiasco stories. And
I hope you're having other opportunities to celebrate in your LGBTQ spirit this June. It's so hard that we can't all be together in our big, beautiful community events. So it's really nice when we can get these evenings together doing silly things like this. So really wonderful.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Uh-oh.
John, I want that hat.
I'll get one for you. I'll send one to you.
They
And
are great, aren't they?
yeah, it's very, I can't wear it outside of my house, so you and my cats will have to appreciate it. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to stop our recording, so no more stories.